Hi, I'm Alicia. Welcome to Gen Tales, where genealogy meets history.
Hi! Today I want to talk about my great-great-grandmother, Emily, the last Lincoln in the family. She was my maternal grandmother's maternal grandmother, a descendant of Jonah Lincoln of Windham, Connecticut. She used to be invited to the annual family reunion, but we never made it there, despite Grandma always talking about it when I was growing up. My grandmother had anecdotes about being Abraham Lincoln's cousins, likely due to Emily thinking that we were. But we actually aren't related to the 16th president's line at all. There's another Abraham from a different time period, and the Lincolns in my line went further west to Iowa, not Kentucky and Illinois. Though Emily's husband's family was from Illinois after they had moved over from coming in Pennsylvania. So, maybe that's the source of the confusion. And there were some articles from other descendants of Jonah Lincoln who claimed that they were related to the president, but those lines have been hashed out over the last several decades. And I did confirmation and then found some more evidence with Thomas and Miller and all of that. And we are not from the colonial period, but probably in England. But her maiden name was Lincoln. And so who are our Lincolns? Our Lincolns. I'm working on that lineage book actually. But I'm going to tell you about Grandma Emily. I've written several articles on her already, on Gentales and Substack. You can find more information if you're interested. Gentales.com, as you see right there. I've been wanting to do that. The lineage book will be listed there when it's finished, but you can also find the other places where Gentales is online beyond YouTube. So let me start about Grandma Emily. She was the youngest of 9 children. She was born in Henry County, Iowa in 1868. She was 20 years old when she married Frederick Ralph Hackett, who was 28. My great-grandmother Ruth was the third of Grandma Emily's four children. The eldest son, Shirley, ran the family farm, in Emily's later years. Emily died in 1957. She lived as a widow for 18 years, and they had retired to Florida, and that's where she's buried. There's some speculation about the family's land in Florida and how it related to my grandparents' meeting. So my great-grandmother Ruth, Emily's daughter, had moved to Florida after she married. Had a couple kids in Iowa. Then my grandmother and her youngest sibling, at least, were born in Florida. But then when great-grandpa Tom left, we still don't know exactly why, but he went up through Canada, ended up in Washington, started a honeybee collective and a new family. But Grandma Ruth went back to Iowa with her 5 daughters to her parents' farm. My grandmother grew up not just on her grandparents' farm, but also not too far from it once her mother remarried. Her stepfather, Bill Cornelius. They had a farm not too far from Emily and Fred. Apparently, my grandfather and grandmother met via the family vacation home in Florida, and then Emily retired, and then yeah. So we've been scrutinizing the censuses with other family mysteries, trying to figure out exactly how that's overlap, whether it was the same little town or whatever. So in Grandma Emily's later years, she wrote out the family tree, and as she remembered it, in order to help my grandmother join DAR. And it's because Jonah Lincoln's, I think it's his father, John, was a Revolutionary War soldier. That gift's now faded. She didn't use acid-free paper, inks at the time. It was the late 50s when she wrote all that down. And the ink's almost gone. But in the 1990s, I transcribed it. So there is a digital copy Plus, I've used it for my research, so it's made her remembrances have made their way into other work to help preserve that family information. I've also gone through vital records and censuses to confirm the information as much as possible, because when she's, writing about her grandparents, don't necessarily have the best memories sometimes of who their siblings were, or if they mention somebody that was actually niece, nephew, cousin. You start getting a little confused sometimes. Even somebody who is knee deep in family history almost all the time, I sometimes go, wait, was that their grandfather or their? I have to think about it, and sometimes I have to look it up, which is why notes are so important, and why I verified what she wrote. And after my aunt passed away several years ago, my mother and I found other letters Emily had written to my grandmother in 1953. And they included her grandfather's siblings. Edward Henry Lincoln. I'm including the link to my transcription of those letters. It's published over on Substack in the video description below, in case you're interested. As I said, one of the letters is a genealogy, and that might be of interest. And speaking of Edward Henry Lincoln, my mother came into the possession, presumably ambrotypes, Civil War era glass photography, and Emily used to have them in her home, and then my mom's sister had them, and then after, she passed a while ago, but her husband passed more recently, and my cousin was finalizing the clean out of all his parents' things and ran across them and thought my mom would be interested. And we were extremely excited for my mom to now have those in her possession. I'm hoping soon to be able to actually get a actual look. My mom has sent me photographs of them. I live 1,000 miles away, and I haven't been there since she received them. So I'm really excited. I'll hopefully will be able to confirm their ambrotypes and not daguerreotypes under glass to make them look like ambrotypes. The Library of Congress has a nice collection of ambrotypes. A lot of them, they don't even know who are in them. It was really popular at the time of the Civil War, especially before soldiers went off. A final visualization to leave their families. Families like to do it. It was pretty popular. So, but it's exciting. But as you saw in the pictures, one face is scratched and we're not sure why. And yeah, so another family mystery. But I did some digging to try to figure out if we could determine who from our family was in these. And so based on the insignias on the hats, the one hat that's visual, it appeared to be crossed swords. So cavalry. And then the hat shape, the medium length cape, Union cavalry soldiers is what I ended up determining. And Emily was born, 1868, so she was, just missed the Civil War. But her father, uncles, and even some cousins would have been old enough to be soldiers in the 1860s. So I looked at her immediate family first, since she was the one that we knew had been in possession of them. Her mother's two brothers, Elijah and Elisha O'Neill, were Union soldiers, but they were infantry. So possible, but maybe I misread the insignia, but their children probably would have ended up with these photos. Why would Emily have had them? So how about, I started looking at Emily's uncle, Sanford Elisha Lincoln, was a corporal in the Union Army, and he served in the cavalry. So if it's him, that it was a joint picture frame, maybe the other one's brother. At that time, you would immediately think it would be her dad. She had them, right? I didn't have any information on Edward Henry having served in the Civil War, but if Sanford Elisha possibly fits, at least probably belonged to their mother. So I did do a little bit more digging. I hadn't worried about too much about trying to find additional Civil War service. Was what was readily available when I was first doing my larger lineage books, and I figured this was a good time to actually do real investigation, like prove or disprove that he fought in the Civil War. Um, I did have a draft registration for Edward Henry Lincoln in 1862. So, possible. That would have been the start of any paperwork for him to enlist. I did find then an actual registration to serve, and I found his picture. Someone else claims it's Edward Henry Lincoln, and it looks an awful lot like the one that isn't scratched out. And so I'm fairly certain that our family combo types are Edward Henry and Patricia. And they were probably taken for their mother. Or it could be that they're both one of the brothers and it was for their wife. Yeah, I'm not entirely, we may never know, but I assume that it is someone within that generation and with that close of a link to Emily. Okay, changing focus just a little bit here. So Emily Esther was the last Lincoln in the family, and the Lincoln name at the time she was born carried a lot of weight. It still does. Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he's on Mount Rushmore. He has a memorial in D.C. He's on our money. He's, the great emancipator. So it makes sense that people who share the surname would want to not shoot down being associated with it. But there's something about family mysteries that really kind of rankle me when people just jump on the easiest explanation or the one that they want to be true. I've written before about myths, and that's a hill that I will gladly stand and shout from certain things. My grandmother told us a lot of things that ended up not being true. Again, I read a whole article about that and the fact that there were a lot of Lincolns in the United States prior to the Civil War who were not related to the president in any consanguineous manner. Even if we do go back to lineages in England, I once mapped out my entire generational tier map. I'm not sure, the pyramid from me to the first ancestors that we knew of to come to the Americas. And that was the Lincolns in the 1630s at the time. 14 generations. Halfway-ish? 7? That's not fifth cousins. That's it. Nobody, third cousins and closer would be genetically provable. So, yeah, we're not related to that particular Lincoln branch. And although Grandma Emily was the last Lincoln in the family, we're the Jonah Lincoln descendants, the Windham, Connecticut, at present.